I'm going to show it to you. I found it. It has the correct elements of my LinkedIn profile, corporate picture, right? But it's someone else. And then I'm going to show this picture to you. And then I have a couple of questions related to training and what kind of content goes into these LLMs to create the content that comes out and why that matters. But yeah, let me show you.
I hate that so much. I don't like it. Knowing that it's supposed to be you, and also like just the stare.
It's not you, it's tech. Technology shapes our world, and yet most of us have no idea how it actually gets made. And that matters, especially as we're heading into a future of dystopian novels. My name is Simone, and I've spent most of my career in tech, being the translator in the room when engineers and users need to understand one another. That's what I'm bringing to podcast format. Conversations with friends, some who build tech, and some who only get to experience it in their daily lives, exploring why technology exists, what problems it is solving, and where it's headed. In What in the Tech Hell, we would try to demystify, together, what has become of our tech landscape and how we can build better tech solutions for ourselves, the planet we live on, and our communities. And on this first episode, I gathered a couple of friends to discuss what in the tech hell is going on with art and AI. I hope you enjoy our conversation.
First guest is Sarah Miskoff, and she goes by the pronouns she and he. Sarah is an artist in multiple forms, so a tattooer, an illustrator, an animator, and she has been in the art world her whole life with no plans of leaving. He's working on hosting events in Toronto using dance to nurture improvisation, vulnerability, and self-expression, and is currently getting into the trades, but will still tattoo on the side to keep his creative mind active. Sarah is also part of the LGBTQ community, and I'm very happy to have you here. Sarah, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Yay, thanks for being here. And my second guest today is Raj Bandyopadhyay. Raj goes by he, him. In 2016, Raj was a data scientist at a Silicon Valley startup with a cushy life. And that's when his partner, his then wife of 8 years, came out as transgender. Seeing his partner find joy in his true self forced Raj to ask what he needed to change in his own life to feel true to himself. And that started a journey that led him to train as a sex and relationship coach, pursue his creative passions, and eventually find a fulfilling role as a photographer and filmmaker here in Toronto. Today, his filmmaking focuses on sensitive topics around grief, masculinity, identity, and the impact of technology. Raj, welcome. Thanks for joining us in What in the Tech Hell.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
To start us off, I am curious to hear. I've been playing a lot with, my initial tech memories, and I wanted to hear that from you. Do you have an initial tech memory? Is there anything that you can remember as how tech got into your life?
I mean, I guess I can think of like the internet.
Okay.
With AOL back in the day. I was like maybe 10 years old, and I was trying very hard to get into Nickelodeon chat rooms as a kid. It was very hard. They'd fill up very quickly. You couldn't just have an unlimited number in a chat room. It would fill up to, I think, 25 guests in each room, and it was very frustrating as a child trying to get and talk to people about my favorite shows on Nickelodeon.
25 people is not too much.
It's not a lot.
Too many, not a lot. Okay, so chat rooms were also a thing in the United States. How about you, Raj?
So I grew up in India, in Mumbai, in the 80s. I did not have access to a computer. Computers were things you saw in like big companies or read about. I actually got to use a computer for the first time in college. when I got into one of India's top like engineering schools in a computer science major. So imagine like, picking a computer science major and never having used an actual computer before. But
Wow.
right. So, but we had a ton of like, we had computer labs and stuff. This was late 90s. The internet was very new, even in India at that time, and very slow. So that I think like spending those hours in a computer lab in college, that would be, I think, my first tech memory. We had to learn to program everything in C, which is, not quite the thing everyone, uses by default
Uses
anymore.
right now. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that was, and then Java came along, and that was a big thing for everyone. It's like, whoa, this is a completely new language. And uh, so, yeah, those were the times for me.
I find it interesting that you went from like basically having no contact with technology / the internet to studying at higher institution. It feels like a crash course to me, and like just learning how
It
everything
is. I
works.
mean, I always wonder what it would be like to like grow up with computers, right?
Yeah,
Because to me at that time it was just a career choice. Like, if you get into college and take a major like, aerospace engineering, nobody expects you to have built a plane before, right? So to me that was a kind of choice at that time. But today it's like computers are something you grew up with. So if you want to get into a software or computer science program in a college, it's almost expected that you've been acquainted with computers and
with
programming
computers.
and all
Yes.
of that for most of your life, including your childhood.
Yeah. And do you have any initial art memories? Any way that like art has been, imbued into your lives since the beginning, Sarah?
I mean, since the beginning, yeah, since
Yeah.
childhood. I mean, there's art classes in school. I loved drawing most of the time. Thankfully, I got a lot of encouragement from my parents in the art world.
Yeah.
And yeah, art's always been part of my, movies and TV, reading, comics, visual arts, very important. Also, singing, dancing. Like there's so many. Arts kind of encompass a lot of things that we don't really think about.
So you mentioned classes. So actually going to school and having art classes. That is something that I used to have. And also, I think to the previous question, those were like my initial tech memories, but I also had like computer classes, like lessons, right? We had like a lab. I don't know, I was in middle school maybe. We had a lab that we would go to and kind of learn how to use the computer and like learn how to use the internet, learn like what that was for.
Yeah, we did. I remember in like, I want to say like 5th grade, we had computers, but like it wasn't like a constant thing. I'm trying to remember because I know we had computers around the school. And I know like we had games, like video games, I guess would also be a way of tech being introduced, even before the internet. I guess that would be the first real tech, maybe cameras, calculators, I guess, if that counts. That counts as tech, I think. But I remember in like 5th grade we had the Oregon Trail. That was like a popular video game on the computer, and like I remember a lot of kids wanted to play it in 5th grade, and like it was like if we had free time we could like play it. And it's the classic like "You've died of dysentery" is from that game, where it's basically you're going across the Oregon Trail and you're trying to survive and learn how to like manage your items and whatnot, and hopefully you and your family survive going across the trail.
In terms of my art memories, it's a little bit different from Sarah's. My first real memory around art was when my 3rd grade arts and craft teacher told me that I had no creativity whatsoever.
Oh no.
That's awful.
Yeah, because like I just didn't have apparently an artistic bend in crafts. And then in I think my 7th grade or something, I failed my drawing exam or a drawing test, and then literally I was like, everyone around me, parents, teachers, were like, "Yeah, you're not good at this art thing. You're just meant to be, in science and tech because you're really smart." That was like, becoming an engineer and going to that, particular school in India, like, and doing computer science. I mean, that basically was my ticket out of India and to move to the US for grad school. I don't think I Obviously, there was art around me to be consumed. Growing up in India, India's a very artistic and creative country in many ways. There's a whole, I grew up in Mumbai. That's also the capital of Bollywood and the movie industry and stuff. I know, and that's more of the popular art. But any kind of like conscious, or rather art as a field, was very much in the purview of like the rich and wealthy and the elite in India.
Yeah.
So that's not something that really common people always have access to, at least at that time.
I'm also curious, Raj, because your shift was from the engineering into the arts, right? Not
Yeah.
long ago. So how much did you have to kind of go back to those memories and kind of understand your relationship with your creativity? Like, was that something that you had to go through in the last few years, or?
I'm still negotiating that. And
Okay.
that brings
Yeah.
up not just relationship with my creativity as a younger person, but also relationship with my India, my country of birth, as a younger person.
Yes.
So it gets really tangled. I did go back to India for 2 months in 2020, right before COVID hit. So January through March 2020. And this was because I was taking care of my parents' estate. They'd both passed, and uh, I literally took like time off work, and I had nothing to do. I was like, I'm gonna go to India and figure out all this bureaucratic shit for 2 months. But also, I used that time because I was in this weird transition phase between tech and photography at the time. I used that time to actually start introducing myself as a photographer and artist, and start building some connections with art communities in India. And that was really interesting because it was literally seeing India through a completely different lens that I had never, I had no idea about growing up. These very vibrant, huge artistic communities, then events, and I went to all kinds of traveled around the country, going to like art festivals, literary festivals, all kinds of things for those 2 months whenever I had a few days. And that was a part of building that connection back,
Yeah.
to a part of
Eileen.
reconciling
Yeah.
with a part of the country that I had never been able to uh, connect with when I was growing up.
Yeah. Yeah. I also have that feelings that our journeys, they're similar in the sense of like no one ever told me that I wasn't creative, but I think I was like, no, I need to like do something serious, right? I need to have a serious job. And I had to get out of my way to be like, oh yeah, maybe, art is this thing that, was always with me, that I can understand how to do wherever I am, etc. And reconciling with this inner artistic child in me has been interesting. For the two of you, do you see a difference between art and content?
I think for me, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure the lines are blurry.
Yeah.
And I think content for me is something where you're trying to sell something. And the
Okay.
sell can be in a broad sense. It can be trying to sell an actual product or service, or even a message
Yeah.
that you really want to get across, want the other person to believe. Whereas art can also be in service of a message. And I think that's where the overlap is. But typically art is coming from more of an inner place, where it's more of the artist kind of expressing their beliefs rather than with the intention of selling or persuading.
Selling something.
I agree. I would say like with content, because the content sometimes can be very manufactured, and there isn't a lot of creativity behind it. It is just to get it done. It's very bottom line, almost cookie cutter. When you're forced to make content, then yes, the quality of it will go down. It's still artistic in a way, but sometimes it just becomes repetitive, has no substance to it. And but when you're making content at your own pace, with your own standards, it will be a lot slower, and you can produce that and make it art at the same time. It just won't be as frequent, and hopefully you have good follower base or people who are like your product, your brand. This is my least favorite thing to do, is making content. I hate it. It is like painful for me, because I also used to be an animator, And I wanted to get out of that world so I could work in the physical world of like working with a person and drawing on a person or
Right.
drawing physical things. But then they're like, oh, but you also have to sell yourself and make videos and, make content, because then you're going to get lost in this algorithm that only prioritizes, people who are constantly churning out stuff like every day, every second. And that's exhausting. And I got out of that world, and now I wanted to get out of that world, but I'm getting sucked into it, and it's my least favorite thing. When I tattoo, my favorite thing is to actually tattoo people, not to make constant
Content
advertisements.
about it.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
want to. I just want to be in the moment. I just want to connect with a person. That's like my main goal for it. I feel amazing after I've tattooed someone, especially when they're having like a great reaction, which is pretty
Mhm.
frequent. And to have this disconnect of like, okay, now I got to record myself being a person to sell myself being a person. It's so complicated.
You know, I guess you're right. And for most artists, content is the thing you make so you can make the money to make more art.
To make more
Yeah.
art, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it's the double-edged sword, It's like I
Yeah.
need to make content so I can get paid.
Yeah. What do you use art for, Sarah?
What do I use? That's a great question. I mean, I use it as an expression to have like a connection with people. I notice when I make art and people are like, I like that, I relate to that, I connect with that. It opens up dialogue, it opens up conversation. And sometimes I think it's like kind of that art imitates life thing. Like sometimes I think like art inspires science, but then science inspires art back, like a volley, like Star Trek is a great
Hmm.
example of art, art inspired by science, but then that inspired other artists, and
Yeah.
it just goes back and forth. I love it. Or other scientists, because I know there's so many people in the sciences because of the art they saw.
Because
But
of
the art
art,
was
yeah.
inspired because of the science. So it's like this, chicken egg situation. So I love that. I love that connections with,
Connection.
yeah.
Yeah. How about you, Raj? What would you say you do art for?
I think for me, art is useful as a reflection on society in the sense that ideally, if I can make the art I want, it would compel a viewer to see some part of their life in the art, whether it's photos or a movie or whatever, and then reflect on how that applies to them. And that could be
Yeah.
a good feeling or a bad feeling or a whatever. I'm not judging feelings. I think sometimes it could be like inducing joy, sometimes it could be inducing something scary, but I would consider a piece of art to be successful, quote unquote, or good art if it can hold up a mirror in some way.
Okay. So we're talking about connection. We're talking about invoking feelings into like spectators.
Yeah, it helps like people be seen, which I think is kind of a combination of like
Yeah.
both of what we're saying, is that like, someone connects with something, but because it provoked the feeling, and then they feel validated, right? So being seen and being heard in a weird way, and that they're not alone.
Yeah, there's one thing that brings me back to chat rooms in the 90s and 2000s again, because I feel like the feeling of connecting and being seen through art reminds me of the feeling of like getting to know someone who was in a different country, like in my early teens, and being like, oh my God, we're into the same kind of stuff. It was a similar type of connection for me. Like when I show my art to someone and they get it, and I feel like it's similar.
Yeah, I feel like art also does draw people, like it's almost like a signal, like, hey, I put this out there, and then people come towards it. Like the people that you want will come towards it, basically.
Yeah.
So, but and this I think goes with content, is that like content is just constantly putting out stuff in hopes of drawing people in, and this is why some people say you have to broaden it, but sometimes you just want the niche people to come in
Yeah.
for your niche thing.
Tell me a little bit about your relationship with AI. Let's start with Raj. Raj, what are you using AI for? Like, how has your relationship going with
So,
AI and technology in general in these last few years?
yeah, so I have a PhD in computer science, not in AI. Worked as a software engineer for several years after that. And then in 2013 or so, I got into this very new and upcoming field called data science and machine learning, which I got really into, and I turned out I was pretty good at it. And so I worked in that field for a while as a data scientist. And in the course of that, I learned quite a bit about machine learning in fundamentals of machine learning. And then I left tech, I guess, started leaving tech in 2017 or so, and then completely left tech in 2020. This was right before the whole advent of LLMs and ChatGPT and all of that. So when that came out, I was very skeptical. I was like, I don't want to use this. I'm not interested. I'm an artist. I want to stay in the realm of art and not kind of dilute it in some way. But over the last year, I've started using AI quite a bit. And what I'm using it the most for is as an assistive device. So I've always struggled with things like time management, organization. I've been diagnosed with ADHD, that sort of thing. And what I found is that AI is good for a couple of things. One is it's very, very good at today's AI, the LLM paradigm. In this paradigm, LLMs are very good at summarizing and organizing large amounts of information. So I use AI a lot to record meetings and transcribe and summarize and remember what happened in a meeting, keeping track of tasks, organizing projects, and that sort of thing. It's also good for problems that don't need optimal solutions.
Yes.
So when I'm trying to figure out how to organize my tasks on a calendar for the week, I don't need an optimal schedule. I just need my tasks to be there at some point to have the right amounts of time allocated on the calendar within certain time blocks. So AI tends to be pretty good at those kinds of planning tasks too. So that's kind of what it's become for me. It's become an assistive device, and it's a really good one. So that's the primary way that I use it now.
How about you, Sarah? How have you been using AI, and how has your relationship with technology been in these last few years?
Oh boy.
Yeah.
So at first, when I heard about generative AI and I feel like AI has been around for a bit longer than,
For much longer,
yeah,
yes.
what's happening now. But because Google was my best friend because I'm very bad at spelling, so I would constantly spell check and make sure I'm using the right terminology. I have been kind of using that in the past, and then now that we have ChatGPT or Claude, I felt like it was good for administrative stuff, bureaucratic stuff, things that as a creative I struggle with, trying
Yeah.
to just write a professional email that says what I needed to say and get to my point. And so it was perfect for that. I've the problem I have with and I think it can be used for art to a point. I
Yeah.
think it's good as a starting point just to get the ball rolling, to get the creative process going. Maybe if there's some math involved of the logistics of how to put something together, I think it could have some usefulness. But the problem is, and I've seen, is that people are using it as a crutch, not a tool. And where they are just making the thing, not editing it, not changing it, not adjusting it, or barely adjusting it at all. And then being like, I made this. And it is very frustrating because as an artist, I put years and years of energy into studying, learning, drawing, physically drawing, talking with other artists, all for someone to just describe something and then instantly it comes out. That's really frustrating because it takes a lot of jobs away from creatives like myself My partner, he is also an illustrator and worked in animation, and he had friends who'd like ask him to draw D&D characters, and because they wanted a very specific character, but so they typed a few things in Dolly, but then sent it to him to use to make a final product, and that, which is like, hey, here's themes. It's almost like a Pinterest board, it's like the same thing as a Pinterest board. I like can understand that as someone who's like, I don't know how to draw this. I know you can, but here's like what's in my head that I can't actually get out. And it's really frustrating now that people are just like, you know what, we're going to even skip the like paying someone to make the art. I'm just going to do this all myself. And then, that's that. And it's,
Is it fair to say at this point, Sarah, that you're not using AI?
At this point, yes. I might use it once in a while again to write an email, and that's about it. And also like the eco problems with it, with the use of water is like another reason why I'm like, I don't feel good using this. Like, I just don't feel good using this. And again, it's not connecting. There's no connection. It's doing the opposite of
let's go back to the specific case that you brought up, because I think that's an interesting one. So someone wanted an illustration work, and in order to translate their idea to the illustrator, they made illustrations on Dolly first. And then brought those to a conversation with an actual person, to an artist.
To get like the actual design that they did want.
That's interesting. Raj, what are your thoughts on a situation like that, on a use of AI like this by someone who is not an artist?
I'll give you an example from a film project I'm working on. So there's a film project that I'm working on that I'm actually shooting next week, just a small, like a short film, a very low budget one. And the story is centered around a confrontation between a woman and a delivery driver, where, without going into the details of the story, like one of the scenes is this kind of tense scene between her and the delivery driver who's bringing food to her door. So that's kind of, that scene is the crux of the film. And I, as part of like a pitch deck I was working on for this idea, I was like, okay, I want to find a photo that that conveys that. So I started searching for delivery drivers and photos all over. You know what I got? All I got are stock photos of delivery drivers looking extremely happy and delivering food. That is all out there is for when it comes to delivery drivers, right? And so I'm like, I can't find the vibe that I need for this image. So at some point I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna give up and create this using Nano Banana, and it did a great job. And that was part of my pitch deck. So it is useful in the sense of that idea of like trying to get out what's in your brain, the vision that you have. Was it perfect? By no means. Would I want to shoot that in real life? Yes. Like the technology for photos and video, especially video, is nowhere close to usable for real film.
I feel like this stuff could be good for like previs, like pre-visualize stuff. Like, again, like before, not as a final product. I feel like as a final, and the problem is people are using it as a final product. That's the
I think one thing couple of things I like to say about AI is that the analogy I want to use for people to use AI is like, it's like working with a very smart, very enthusiastic, and very inexperienced intern. So you have to always give them extremely detailed, careful instructions, and you always have to check their work. They can do a lot, they can work very hard, but they can completely go off. And then in order to be able to check their work, you actually need to know what good looks like.
You need to understand it,
If you are not an expert in a field, so you have no idea what good looks like, you are going to look at the content that an AI generates and be like, yeah, that looks good to me.
Yeah, good enough.
Good enough. Like if I try to do an illustration or whatever, I look at it and be like, that looks like a decent enough image, but I'm not an illustrator. I don't see my illustrator or designer friends see all these little details that I have zero idea about.
What I'm hearing is that it might be okay, maybe, or using AI might be useful when we do have a problem that we want to solve, or maybe there's like a very specific thing that you need done. I have been thinking a lot about the sale of LLMs as this one big solution for all things from writing to painting to thinking about math to thinking about health. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts when it comes to, okay, thinking of art. These are maybe like the problems that I would like to solve in my day to day with art that AI could be really helpful for me. Instead of like thinking of this, all encompassing solution that can solve everything and that understands art and that, could solve everything, every single problem in like a mediocre kind of way.
I mean, like I said, like I think like for like mathematical things, it could be very helpful of like
Yeah.
figuring out how to like lay something out,
Mhm.
appropriate, like, and you give them like the specs and the sizing and the image, and you're like, how would this look on this building? Like, boop. All right. When you need something very quick, it's very useful. The thing is that you also think that everything needs to be done quickly. Which I wish we could all just slow down a little bit. I think AI is gonna dominate like advertising because
Yeah.
advertising is so quick and they need things fast and I can see AI like being heavily used for that kind of stuff. And
For the
but I do think
volume, the
for the
creation
volume,
of
yeah.
visuals
But I
and
think
volume. Okay.
but again, AI could be good for like, yeah, like planning, like get previs, like getting things set up so then you can actually go and make the thing. You can record the person, you can take the photo, you can paint the picture, you can sing the song, whichever, as a tool. I think it's a great tool.
How about you, Raj? You talked about not finding the right stock photo. Is there anything else that you feel like is helpful?
I mean, I use it all the time for inspiration, similar
Okay.
to like creating mood boards, for example, for photo shoots.
Okay.
And I encourage my clients to do that too. It's like, hey, if you want a specific photo, you have something in your head, put it in AI, create a very rough thing of it, and then we'll figure out how to actually get the photo in real life, if we can. But that starts that conversation, and it's really that's a useful tool for me to work with clients to get a sense of what their vision is.
I have a question. I'm just curious. Have you ever worked with a client where they've told you what you want, you've talked to them, given them ideas, and then they've used AI and not gone with your services? I'm just curious if that has happened. I hope it hasn't, but
I mean, it's entirely likely, but if that's the case, I wouldn't always know. So here's the thing, that goes into something else. So with photography, I feel like there are certain kinds, like, and that's true for a lot of different kind of art forms, I think. There are certain kinds of photography, or certain genres of photography to which we don't really have that much of an emotional attachment. For
Yeah.
example, corporate headshots. Nobody that I know about is too attached to their LinkedIn headshot. It's like for most people in the world, it's something that just needs to be done, and it's like pulling teeth for them. Most people are going to outsource that to AI now. They'll do the thing of like taking a picture on their phone and then uploading it to an app and getting like 5 corporate images and using one of them. Product photography for a lot of them, like catalog photography, for example,
Yeah.
when you just need to get a photographer to take pictures of 1,000 products to put in a catalog. People are probably going to be fine using AI for that. Your wedding photos, maybe not. That is probably, you may want to alter, like I'm sure there'll be ways people who will want to alter them in different ways, but though you have an emotional attachment to that typically, and so that may be something that you want to hire a photographer for, because you do want to capture the human aspect of it. In my case, like most of my photography work, I'm a personal branding photographer. I work with a lot of professional speakers and authors who are writing a book or a speech, and they want to capture something that's specific about them, and they are very emotionally attached to their photos because
Yeah.
their photos are about conveying a very particular set of emotions. So hasn't happened to me yet. But again, these technologies are constantly evolving. So
or at
they're
least
getting
hasn't
better and
happened
better.
to where
Yeah.
you're aware of it, at least.
Yeah. I'm sure, like in a few months or even a couple of years, we'll be at the point where it can generate pretty realistic photos, even of like various emotions and things like that.
I have a sad/funny story with corporate photos. I
Oh
was
no.
dealing with AI and my LinkedIn photo. And basically, was giving me a prompt to like, no, try our AI, please try our AI. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna try our AI. And then I was like, make this round. Just my LinkedIn photo, I just wanted it to be round, right? What they chose, the product choice was to upload my image, recreate my face all over again, and then make it round. But they created another face. I'm not sure I can show you here. Maybe I'll find it. It looks like me, but it's like a pasteurized version of me. I'm going to show it to you. I found it. It has the correct elements of my LinkedIn profile, corporate picture, right? But it's someone else. And then I'm going to show this picture to you. And then I have a couple of questions related to training and what kind of content goes into these LLMs to create the content that comes out and why that matters. But yeah, let me show you.
Oh,
Oh, I
who
hate
is that?
so much. I don't like it. Knowing that it's supposed to be you, and also like just the stare.
I know. And it has all the elements of my LinkedIn picture, right?
The eyes not smiling at all.
But my face
No, it is dead. Uncanny Valley. Very uncanny valley.
Yeah, but as a photographer, I have to say that one thing that I always struggle with is even before AI, it's not pre-AI, is how much people's actual appearance can differ from how they see themselves.
How they see themselves, okay.
Yeah, like I'll talk to people. Sometimes I'll have some people who are clients versus not, and I remember having these experiences where I would like take a photo of somebody that to me looked like the best version of them, but still them.
Yeah.
Like that person. And then they would show me like a very, very altered version that was much skinnier or much whatever, very different. To my eyes, I'm like, that doesn't look like you at all. It looks or a version that to them looks like 10 years younger or whatever. And then they would very confidently, the person will be like, this feels like me. And that's a very telling statement because it's like it's almost like a form of body dysphoria, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Not gender dysphoria, just body dysphoria in general, where you see a different yourself as a different person. Like
yes.
There might be like you see yourself like as a skinny person wanting to get out of your body or something like that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And I think AI, like these AI tools can actually like surface that quite a bit and bring that up for different people because it gives them the power to create the version of themselves that how they see themselves. People's self-image can be very different from how we see them. And then sometimes that shows up in how the pictures that they choose for themselves.
Yes.
It's funny that you say that, and like I don't know if this is terribly related, but like sometimes I'll see photos of myself and I'm like, that doesn't look like me. Like, but I do know that photos sometimes will flatten people out.
Yes.
Because then I look in the mirror and I'm like, that does not look like the same person.
Yeah.
But I also know there's like a warped, it's the way the lens
and our brain
is shaped.
processes mirrors differently than photos too.
And I like what I see in the mirror, thankfully, but like photos, I'm like, it's really hit or miss. And I have a whole theory on how people who take photos, like, on their cell phone with like women versus men usually sometimes because sometimes I notice when women take photos of me, I look way better, and then when men take photos of me, I do not look good at all. But that's the casual person, not a photographer per se.
Yeah. But what's the difference? What's the better versus not?
They always they catch me like when I'm like a very nice smile, where I look very like relaxed and just like my good side, I guess, is like the best way to explain it. And then when like my partners sometimes will take pictures of me, I always see like where I'm sagging in places, where like there's like parts of my body that are like shaped weird, that like because I'm sitting in a weird angle, like they like there's or they'll take it from like too low or too high.
Yeah, and I think women, especially, and women have always been socialized to be conscious of other people's
That
gaze,
too.
and now with phones, it's like you get that constant practice.
Yeah. I've
So
also
even if
worked
you're,
on
yeah,
trying to just let go and be like, you know
yeah,
what? That's what it is. Like if
yeah,
people and if they're going to treat me poorly because of it, because of society,
yeah,
those are people I want to interact with. I'll probably
yeah,
interact with the people who still are going to treat me well
yeah,
based on my photo.
Yeah. And I want to go back to the ways AI can produce images of us. I understand your point, Raj, of it allows us to create this different version of ourselves that can only exist online. But I'm curious if it's possible, or if you can, the two of you, as you're using technology and as you're using AI, to ignore the challenges that we have with training, right? Because my best guess of what happened with this picture is that this app's AI had not seen enough non-white faces to
yeah,
understand that the picture it was seeing, it was not of a white
yeah.
woman, and then it just tried to, smudge my face to make it the form that it could recognize. All these LLMs, they are trained on data that is available on the internet. We understand that there is a lot of bias in the data that we
Mm.
can find on the internet. I will add information on that in the notes for this show. But yeah, I'm curious, like when you're using AI, is this something that you're actually thinking about when it comes to looking at the output and being like, oh yeah, this output's kind of informed by that, by the initial
Absolutely,
data?
absolutely. Because for my film work, like when I, now as a filmmaker, you always have to create visuals to illustrate, even before you make a movie. Whether when you're pitching it or showing an idea to somebody, you have to create visuals. It's like the example I gave before with the delivery driver, right? And it's very interesting to see when you are trying to use AI to create a particular scene, and you prompt it without too much specifics. What are the default options that the AI chooses for different
Yes.
people? Like, if I say employee with a CEO, like having a tense meeting in a corporate boardroom, the choices it makes for how it's going to depict who the CEO is versus the
Yes.
employee is, like that sort of thing, like shows up. And what I end up typically doing is I will take pictures of actual actors and say, use this actor's picture in this
Okay.
scene to impose my choices, because otherwise it doesn't work. Even if I say replace this white male CEO with a black woman, it's going to do some really weird thing, honestly.
Yeah.
Or it'll insist on doing like a light-skinned black woman with very white features or stuff like that. Like it keeps trying to like impose its defaults. But if I say like take this specific person and put them in this scene, it works much better. So I'm very aware of those, because as a filmmaker, I have to think a lot about my characters in my story, who they are, their backstories, and everything about them. And so that contrast is always very evident.
Okay, so it's something that you need to keep in mind even before you
Yeah.
start using an AI to help you out in these projects. Sarah,
Wasn't
yeah,
the picture using your face? Like, didn't it already have access to you? Or what?
it
You just
did.
wanted it to be a circle.
I just wanted it to be a circle, and then that was the funniest thing about this. This is too
I mean,
ridiculous
it was wild. It was a wild
because
picture.
it also involves product decisions. So it understood what I was asking for, but it chose to use the product much more because I wasn't asking for an AI generated image, for example, but it did feed my image without telling me into their AI, and then it created an AI generated image of me. So it's almost like a product decision instead of just like the AI and how it is trained or not. It's like this product specifically, they chose to
Yeah.
overachieve on my prompt, right? They
Yeah.
Yeah.
chose to kind of force me to use AI 3 times in a prompt instead of 1, for example,
Yeah.
like something along these lines, right? Does
like
that make
yeah, like
sense? Sarah?
it wasn't. Oh, totally. It was like it
Yeah,
just was doing extra stuff that wasn't
exactly.
asked of it,
That
which
I
is
haven't
that's why I was
asked
like,
for.
which
Exactly.
I find that's why I found that really interesting that it just like, like yeah, we could do the circle, but we could also like completely change your appearance.
Yeah.
Not being, which is so weird that it did. I don't know if that's like a glitch or if that's what it does normally.
I don't think that was a glitch. It's the goal. It's the goal of that product, at least in that situation.
Yeah, but then
So
you have to think about what an AI product actually is, right? So
yes,
it's probably backed by an LLM, one of those, the big
yes.
LLMs. And then there is a layer in front of it, which has probably a bunch of system prompts built in
Hmm.
on how to interact with your prompts and the input image. And a lot of that, a lot of the engineering goes into, and the product decisions go into that system
Into
prompt.
that layer. Yeah.
Yeah, to that
Yeah.
layer, and how much work they're doing in that layer. And a lot of times, even the companies who are building these apps, they don't really understand the back end very much of how much it works. They're making that layer a very dumb or thin layer. Whereas if you look at the system prompts, like whatever is released by or leaked about, like OpenAI or Claude or some of these big AIs, they have entire engineering and research and philosophy and other people, teams of those, trying to design that prompt layer on top of the raw LLM. One of those things where people underestimate how much work you need to do on top of a raw LLM to actually get good results that apply to a broad swath of people.
Yeah. The LLM also depends on the UI on top of it, right? If your
Yeah,
product is misleading,
yeah,
you're going to be, for example, prompting it way more than you understand you are, than you think you are.
yeah.
So yeah, it needs to be on top of a product that is solid. You're very right,
Mm.
Raj. And yeah, we're reaching our mark here. I have a few less questions, but maybe we can start with, where do you see your art going in the next few years? Sarah, do you want to start with you?
To be honest, I don't know at the moment.
Yeah.
I'd like to continue doing the tattooing. I've been getting back into like physical media, like painting. I'm trying to like personally try to take it back and be more in the physical world.
Yeah.
And less digital. Like I was saying before, of like, I wish we could take a step back from like technology in general. I don't know, maybe it's because like the millennial in me is just like, I miss the good old days and things like that. Sometimes I think there needs to be a balance. Like I think just relying on digital is over time not healthy, because again it polarizes everybody. We're not connecting, we're not having those moments because it's being generated and churned out and turned into content. And I want to connect more with art that's like people can see and touch and smell and interact with. Hence why I'm like trying to do like these a dance theme thing. I also want to do like, and I have a fun, I want to do more events also, which is again an artistic, performance kind of thing. Because it's hard to generate AI with that stuff. But I think moving forward with me and my art, I think I'm going to try to go more towards like traditional
Physical
stuff,
world.
the physical world. I love working with my hands. I love being in it.
And I share the event and in-person get together. I think this is really the future of connection. We need to meet more in person.
Yeah.
So
we can use it to like make the invites, we can use the digital parts to like make the connections and everything, but then we actually have to go there and be there to do it.
There with each other.
We have to follow through.
Yeah. How about you, Raj? Where do you see your art going the next few years?
I think the big thing that I'm focusing on, this year, I'm trying to just make as many short films as I can, because I need a foundation of those to as a filmmaker. But the particular aspect of the craft that I really of filmmaking that I really care about is storytelling. And storytelling is obviously, in the film world or any world, has a ton of craft built in about how to construct a well-told story. Right? There are frameworks and tools and all kinds of ways, heuristics if you say rules of thumb to create what goes into creating a good story. But ultimately, a good story is about one that really hits you in the feels. And there is an element of art there that I have not seen AI be able to meet, and I don't really foresee it being able to meet because even in the near future, because the best stories come from human experience, whether it's your own lived experience or somebody else's, because they're the nuances of that story that we feel. Like one of the ways I use AI is that if I have a story idea and I want to compare it with a bunch of frameworks, and AI can actually do a very good job taking the story synopsis and saying, okay, based on the framework, like the hero's journey framework, these are the stages that I see. This is what it meets. This is what it doesn't meet. And I can have a story that perfectly hits all 9 stages or 17 stages or whatever, and you read it and it still feels like nothing. It's like, this doesn't, and then you have to kind of infuse it with that human experience. And I think that's the space I want to master. And that is very much a human kind of emotion, AI-free space that I would like to play in. It also makes you realize how much of the problems with AI are because people in tech, people who are engineers and build these AI systems, have no concept of what art actually is. The most they can understand is confusing craft with art, which is a distinction we didn't quite get into, but that's an important distinction.
I want to point out one of the things with art that I've learned over time is we have this idea that to make art means it has to be good art. And the thing is, art isn't always necessarily good, and which, to quantify that is also like a hard thing,
like its own problem, right?
Yeah, I've had so many friends who are like, oh, I don't know how to draw, which is a lie. They tell themselves everyone knows how to draw. Like, if you can hold the pencil and move it around and leave your image on something, then you technically know how to draw. But they think I don't draw well, so I don't know how to draw. Hence, this is why, going way back to when, Raj, when you were talking about in school and how, like, oh, you don't have a career in this. It's like the whole point of to make art is to be human, is to make an expression, to express yourself. Whether or not you're like, and to, if you want to express yourself more precisely, then you will study it and do it more. But if you're just making it to make it, that is also so valid. And I get so angry where it's like you're taking away people's creativity, because also it takes away critical thinking skills as well, because if you can't express yourself, then you also limit yourself emotionally and mentally and a lot of other ways. So it's very frustrating, especially with children. Oh my God, like just telling a kid that like you can't draw is like you have such a skewed
long time to get rid of that voice of that teacher.
Yeah, and like, but there's a lot of people who don't know that, and don't get that outside validation of like, no, you're making art. You are making art, and art doesn't have to look good because it's subjective. And like, what I find not my cup of tea might be everyone's cup of tea, but it's all subjective. So if I say, oh, it's not my thing, that doesn't mean it's bad and it's invalid. It's just I don't connect with it, versus other people who will connect with it. Anyone can draw it. You can make art, even stick figures. It's art. It's all art. I'm very like adamant of like that people can make and create things.
It also touches on, it's almost like art for the spectator, the craft, or like the content, or the one thing that you need to put out, versus art for the artist, art for the expression of it. Right?
And it's also like we've also monetized it. So if it doesn't make money, it is worthless, which is that's another story for another day. But like, I think that's why I want to encourage more people to like try. And when you're just doing just AI, you're not actually in it. You have the ideas, that's great, but like you're not connecting. There's a middleman that's preventing you from actually getting that
executing your art.
The satisfaction in your brain to be like, I have created this completely, and
Simone, you and I had this conversation in a different time. I remember where we talked about the importance of friction. And
yes.
friction, you need friction to create good art. One of the problems with AI, the way they're designed and imposed on us, is they advertise that as a feature that they remove all friction. But friction is where you really have to like push inside yourself or go inside yourself and get uncomfortable with something. And that's what brings the art out.
I try to tell people, like, when you make mistakes, that's actually a great thing. And we have to really like focus on the failures and like in a good way of like, oh no, okay, now we know what not to do or what doesn't work. And, you know, and it's hard. It's a very scary thing. It's vulnerable. And that's hard for a lot of people. And instead of wanting to be vulnerable, they're like, well, I'll just make something perfect and not have to like, you know,
I mean,
be
if you're
seen
using AI to make art in that way, right, to make your final piece of art, it is very much like not allowing yourself to be vulnerable. It is very much like
it's a wall.
Yeah.
Simone, can I add something here before we finish? Just one
sure.
point again. Sarah, you bringing up some things about AI, some problems about AI, and I had exactly the same conversation with someone else on LinkedIn today, so I feel like this is important. People often bring up two big challenges with AI, and those are both very valid. One is obviously the environmental impact. The big three AIs, they use huge data centers, all of that, huge environmental impact. The second one is the politics as well as surveillance and all of that, the state we are creating. I think both of those things rely on a very common assumption, which non-technical people often have, is that the only LLM technologies available are the big three companies, which is OpenAI, Anthropic, Claude, and Gemini or Google. One of the most exciting developments to me in the AI space is that there are a ton of other LLMs being created, many of them open source, many of them by smaller companies, many of them available for free out there, and many of which can actually run on your laptop, literally, or smaller computers. And they're getting better and faster constantly. So like I run a very small LLM on my Mac Mini, which is like 16 gigs of RAM. And that does as well as ChatGPT did maybe like a year ago or a year and a half ago. So people are not aware of these, that this is AI is not doesn't just mean these three companies.
One of the reasons why I try not to use Google and why I was using DuckDuckGo. So like, but then of course it blocked me out and I couldn't use this app here and I had to switch, which is like, you know, I'm trying to, but they make it very hard. They don't make it easy to transition out of it, you know, like I still have Gmail and I'm like trying to like, oh, you know, but I have like this whole, like my whole thing's like intertwined with it. So it's like, do I leave it? Do I find a new one? You know,
some companies have hostages, not users.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
You just have to stay there.
It's the convenience, and I'm personally trying to like slowly like transition out of it. So you know, I have DuckDuckGo on all my browsers instead of, but then it's always like, anytime I use Gmail, it's like, do you want to like switch over to Chrome? And it's like, can you shut up? Can you turn this feature off? I want to stop being asked this. No, exactly.
The other thing to think about is if you want to move away from the big three AIs but still use other capable AIs, so you try something like OpenRouter, or there are similar services, which are basically gateways. You subscribe with one subscription or one payment, you get access to a ton of different AIs, not just the big three, but a huge range of them. And then you can choose where, you know, which ones you allocate your money to. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. So those are technologies that people using AI should be aware of, and especially those with concerns with AI. Sure.
Yeah. One of my biggest reasons behind this podcast is really to understand and create conversation around the fact that the choices that we're making with AI, they are bad right now. Like we're all kind of worried about them, right? But they are a specific set of choices. There are specific business choices. None of it is like was given to us by God. Like none of it just like sprouted in nature. All of it is like business choices, political choices that are coming up, and like the way the LLMs are created and like the amount of energy they use, like all of that, there are other ways to do it, right?
Yeah.
So that's definitely a conversation that I want to start. Thank you,
Yeah, and
Rob,
I think
for
like it's
bringing it up.
important that especially countries now also like think about their own sovereign AIs or like moving away
Yes.
from, you know, American, big American company AIs, all of that. It's getting more
Yeah.
and more political and interesting.
Yeah.
Very
All
true.
right. Anything else that you'd like to add before we go? Okay.
I think this was
Anyone
great.
want a
Thank you.
tattoo?
So if you want to tattoo Sarah, where can people find you?
On Instagram.
What's your handle on Instagram?
My handle is trinity.hellwoods. It's HELLWOODS, like the park.
I'm also on Instagram, though mostly as a lurker, but it's Series A Photography. And you can also go on my website, seriesaphotography.com.
I'm going to be looking out for your movie coming out soon.
Yeah, same.
Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you very much. See you all later.
Bye.
All right, so this is Simone from the future closing this episode. It has now been a few weeks since my conversation with Raj and Sarah. And again, I'm so grateful to you two. Thank you, my friends, for believing and showing up for a first episode without really knowing what we were getting into together. Thank you so much. But on the topic of this episode, just last week, OpenAI announced it will be shutting down Sora and all text-to-video models related to it. Sora has been a big staple of AI-generated art, quote-unquote. So, yeah, interesting developments in the field that we just talked about. And honestly, an interesting lesson in being product-led. Really, no one was asking for that product. From Reuters, open quote. The move is the first big step by the ChatGPT maker to focus its business on potentially more lucrative areas such as coding tools and corporate customers. As part of the 3-year deal, Disney said it would invest $1 billion in OpenAI and lend more than 200 of its iconic characters to be used in short, AI-generated videos. End quote from Reuters. After listening to this episode, there are a few things that I want to point out. First, even for people who do work in technology, it's really hard not to personify tech products. Whenever we're talking about the AI or a product thinking or doing something, please know that they're all just business decisions made by people. So much like Sarah was saying, my 2026 resolution was also to experience more art in real life. So spend more time being present with people in person. I want to remind myself how it is to experience art without an intermediary platform. And I am positive the future of connection is offline. However, I would be remiss as a product manager if I did not stress that even if you're not using one of the big LLM products, you might still be using AI. Products that at a first glance do not seem like an AI product, like a Google search or a messaging app like WhatsApp, still may have AI embedded in them in ways that you as a user might not fully notice. So bottom line is, using AI is one of the tools in my belt, but training my eye to AI functionalities, even in applications and products that are not very clearly AI first, is also very important. The final point I want to bring up is that we dove a little bit into the problems with lack of representation during training of a large language model. And the main book I could recommend on this topic is Safia Omoja Noble's Algorithms of Oppression. More information about it on the notes. But there is, of course, another major problem here that is taking artists, publishers, industry representatives to sue companies like OpenAI, Microsoft, and Anthropic. These lawsuits are motivated by these companies' use of these artistic creations for training large language models without any compensation. Hoping to cover this topic specifically on a future episode. There's so much to talk about there. But for now, I'm also leaving some links here on this topic on the notes for this episode. And that is it. I am curious to hear your thoughts on art and AI. I will see you in a couple of weeks with a banger of a chat on the subworld of tech-enabled crime. I will see you then. Bye. What in the Tech Hell is created and hosted by Simone Lima. Find us on socials in What in the Tech Hell, or get in touch in whatinthetechhell@gmail.com.